Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss, and in today's segment we'll be discussing your career as an orchestrator. Since I started this channel a year ago, I've gotten many requests for advice from my viewers about their careers. Even though each request was pretty specific, there were some important general bits of advice that applied to everyone. So here are some things that I want you to think about, especially if you are a young composer deciding to spend a lifetime in music. First things first, it doesn't hurt to ask yourself why you are doing this. If you have the brains and the creativity to be an orchestral composer, then you probably have the ability to do many other much more financially rewarding things with your life. So why be a composer? If your answer is for fame or immortality, get real. That motive is not going to sustain you when the going gets tough, and it will. But if you compose because you just can't help it, because you're willing to stay up all night just to get that one precious idea, because your whole life lights up like a forest fire when your music is performed, then maybe, just maybe, you're a composer that can make your passion into a life path. There are a lot of heroic illusions being put out there in the media about the lives of the great artists, but the truth is that the artists who actually had successful, rewarding careers were mostly practical, meticulous people. Beethoven wrote far more letters correcting his publisher's errors than he ever did about the significance of his music or his place in history. Set aside all of the overblown movies about Beethoven and Mozart. Set aside the worshipful biographies and the volumes of musical analysis. Even set aside the music itself for a moment. What you're left with is two intensely creative people who established a new way that artists could survive without direct royal patronage. It's a system that survives to this very day of commissions, performances, publishing, and creative interactions, where creativity is honored and not beholden to any tyrant. That is what's worth living for if you're really determined to be a professional composer. Not glory or fame or immortality, or even when it comes right down to it, money. Rather, it's the opportunity to build your own life through a series of creative acts, each of which makes you a stronger, wiser, and deeper composer. My whole life has been a set of choices, luck, and inspirations that led me to where I am now. Somehow I was able to make it to this point without having to take orders from anyone, or live up to anyone else's expectations that were different from my own. I'm not incredibly wealthy or renowned as a composer, but I'm immensely happy with what I'm doing, and somehow I'm able to keep things going from one commission to the next. My supreme accomplishment? Probably the fact that I've stopped caring about how I'll be remembered by future generations. I've mentored many young musicians and composers, and one problem that a lot of them share is trying to be great before they are even good at what they do. Here's an example. Writing nothing but symphonies before you've even written one decent piano sonata or string quartet. Or trying to score a full-length motion picture before you've even written a few cues for short films or scenes. Even if it wasn't an issue of credibility, there's also the flow of your own ideas to consider. You might end up exhausting your creative spark on a lot of grandiose pieces that you will regret having composed in a few years. Then where are you? Here's a thought experiment. Let's take the amount of ideas, time, and energy required to write one enormous orchestral piece and express that as a quantity of time and creative commitment. Now, let's look at two hypothetical young composers, both composing their first serious works. Young composer A is going to go for it and write her one-hour opus in an attempt to outdo the Planets, Carmina Burana, and The Rite of Spring. She's picked a sizable orchestra of Wagnerian proportions, quadruple winds, 8 horns, 4 each trumpets and trombones, 2 tubas, 2 timpanists, 4 other percussionists, 2 harps, piano, and strings. Now let's look at young composer B. She is also putting everything she's got into writing a piece for orchestra, except she is writing a 10-minute piece for a standard-size orchestra. Doubled winds, 4 horns, 3 each trumpets and trombones, tuba, 1 timpanist, 2 percussionists, 1 harp, and strings. Now let's put their efforts side by side. Which young composer has a better chance at building their career over the same amount of time? All things being equal, it's easily young composer B. She's got more time than A to rewrite, adjust, edit, and refine. Furthermore, by the time B is done, A is only 1/6 of the way through. B now has the time to write some smaller scale pieces, work with some musicians in an effort to get performed or recorded, enter some contests and readings, maybe even write another orchestral piece. By the time that A is done, B is well connected with other musicians and may even have heard her piece played. So what's the reality? I would judge that if both composers are intelligent, motivated, and lucky, then this is what's likely to happen. A will get offered a performance, but only a short segment of the big bombastic piece, and only if she reduces the size of the orchestra substantially. B will get a performance, and if it's a success, then great. If not, then too bad, but at least she hasn't thrown a huge chunk of her life away. So pay your dues. Build your career one artistic act at a time, and try to make each act count. A symphony is a public work. Let your public help you decide when the time is right to compose one. Quick, what's the most important word on a typical grant proposal? The word community. That's right. The people who are receiving the most attention in the performing arts out there are getting involved in what's happening, not just up there on stage, but out in the place where their audience comes from. It's no longer practical to live in an isolated little shack in the middle of nowhere, working on your mad magnum opus like some sort of artistic Unabomber. Today's composers are finding direction by creating new ways to make their music relevant to the broader community. Some of the pieces that I feel the most proud of having composed were written as dedications, cultural and ecological education pieces, and in commemoration, like these bravura variations in memory of a young violinist who died in a car accident. A little while ago, I talked about the choices in artistic works that built my career. But there was also a series of connections with people, performing groups, and organizations that was key in attaining my goals, and I owe them a lot. Those relationships have sustained me personally, not just artistically, and showed me possibilities I'd never have imagined on my own. I'll address this topic some more in the next segment of this intro series, but for now, I just feel that this is an important part of being an artist in general, knowing who you are writing for, and being part of the audience that you'd like to have in attendance at your premiere. Being a professional composer is all about time, knowledge, and inspiration. How much time do you have, and exactly what is the process of creation? It's not enough just to say, I'm going to write a musical. No, because there are rehearsals, test audiences, rewrites, budgets, and contracts. In any project, whether it's half a page or half a decade, you have to try to determine as best as you can exactly what kind of time and effort are involved. A pro should always have a contract for any formal commission. This is so important. If you look at the history of concert music, even back at its beginnings, it's very clear that composers were getting shortchanged as a matter of normal business. If you're not yet a pro, or if you are doing some sort of exchange instead of a commission, then make sure you have some sort of clear agreement before you do any work. No composer should ever write music for a public performance that doesn't acknowledge their contribution in the promotional materials and program. If the presenters can't afford to pay you, then they should do their best to help promote you. And if they can afford to commission you, then it's foolish not to respect your role as a composer. I've been in both positions, being commissioned on the one hand, and hiring musicians to record and perform my works on the other. The best work I have ever got out of a musician is when they got paid for their effort. The worst results were when very talented people offered to perform or record for free. The lack of a paycheck gave them the psychological freedom not to take what they were doing very seriously, and my project suffered as a consequence. So I would say, get paid, pay others, work out exactly what you were supposed to be doing, then do it so well that they want to work with you again every chance they get. That's one short definition of being a professional. That's right, stop apologizing. First impressions count, right? Well, you're shooting yourself right in the face when you send somebody a piece that you care about with words like, "Sorry, I know this could be better," or "This amusing little piece is a minor effort, but you might like it." Don't get into this self-eroding vibe. It's no way for a professional to act. Never take it for granted that your audience is not going to like your music. There's just not enough time in the world, nor space in your psyche, to constantly second-guess someone else's reaction. No matter how funny or humble you think you're being, the end result is that your audience will get the message that you don't believe in yourself. What's even worse is apologizing on behalf of your performers. That is the proverbial kiss of death. Imagine a conductor receiving your orchestral score and a CD of the first reading, along with a letter that basically says, "Here's an audio recording of an incompetent orchestra doing my piece. Sorry about how they mess it up all over the place." Your score is going to end up in the trash, because you've just let the conductor know what kind of treatment he'd be bound to receive from you if you sent around a recording of his version of your piece. What you should do, instead of apologizing, is just be very clear about what it is you're presenting, and let the audience make its own judgment. Without saying anything regretful or negative, simply say exactly what you are presenting, like, "This is a recording of my piece in an informal reading by a community orchestra conducted by so-and-so. If your YouTube viewer, university auditor, or prospective conductor is smart enough to get what that means, then great. If they are not, then you are better off not being in an artistic relationship with them, whether they are audience or performer." Conceptually speaking, there's nothing about this advice that wouldn't also apply to a playwright, say, or any other creative artist. There are some universal threads that run through the lives of all of us who make a career out of the arts, for better or worse, and what I've done so far is to show how those threads apply to you and me as orchestral composers. But there's also much to be discussed about the specifics of building a career and how to get the chops, recognition, and knowledge that you need. We're going to talk about all that and more in our next segment of Intro to Orchestration.